Hey friends, good to see you back. Today we're crossing the border of Vada and taking a look at tourist complaints that absolutely no one needed to say out loud.
Apparently, crossing the border also means checking your common sense at customs. 1. The maple syrup meltdown. An American tourist in Montreal filed a complaint because his pancakes tasted too Canadian. When staff politely asked what that meant, he said the syrup was too thick, too sweet, and suspiciously local. He demanded real American syrup, preferably Aunt Jemima, because the stuff you have here tastes like trees. When informed that maple syrup does, in fact, come from trees, he accused the restaurant of being too authentic. They offered him corn syrup instead. He left a one-star review claiming Canadians were running a national prank. Somewhere, a lumberjack probably felt personally insulted. 2. The moose that wouldn't pose. A family from Ontario visiting Yellowstone complained that the park's wildlife wasn't very cooperative. Specifically, they were furious that a moose refused to turn around for a photo. They claimed American animals were rude and poorly trained compared to Canadian ones, which, according to them, at least acknowledge people. The ranger tried explaining that moose are not employees and don't take photo requests. The family demanded a partial refund for disrespectful fauna. It's unclear if they expected the park to issue an apology on behalf of all ungulates. 3. The Celsius conspiracy. A U.S. couple visiting Vancouver stormed into their hotel lobby, furious that the thermostat was broken. It displayed 20 degrees, but their room was clearly not below freezing. When the clerk explained that Canada uses Celsius, they accused the hotel of running a scam to trick Americans into thinking it's warmer. They even demanded temperature conversion training for guests. The clerk calmly printed out a conversion chart. The couple studied it for a moment, then concluded, "This is why people think Canada is weird." Somewhere between Fahrenheit and Celsius, they lost the plot, and maybe their patience too. 4. The Beaver Dam disaster. One American tourist visiting Alberta called the local park service to report vandalism in the lake. The alleged criminals? Beavers. He was furious that someone let them build a wall right across the water, claiming it ruined the view and probably violated zoning laws. When a ranger explained that beavers were natural engineers, not rogue construction workers, the man demanded they be fined or relocated for unauthorized damming. He even offered to help dismantle it with his bare hands. The ranger, wisely, declined. A week later, the tourist left a review calling Canada a country overrun by lazy rodents and weak law enforcement. Meanwhile, the beavers continued their architectural masterpiece undisturbed, blissfully unaware they'd been reported for eco-terrorism. 5. The Niagara Falls refund request. A Canadian family visiting the U.S. side of Niagara Falls marched into the visitor center demanding a refund because the waterfall looked smaller than the pictures. They insisted the Americans must have turned down the water pressure that day, calling it a total scam. When staff tried explaining that the volume of the falls depends on natural flow, not plumbing, the dad snapped, "So you're saying you can't turn it back up?" The best part, they requested a voucher for a do-over when it's at full blast. Somewhere, Mother Nature just rolled her eyes. The family returned home claiming the Canadian side had more powerful water and better lighting. Congratulations to Canada. Apparently, it now owns gravity and hydraulic superiority. 6. The moose crossing complaint. In rural Maine, a Canadian tourist pulled over to file a formal complaint with local police after waiting 5 minutes for a moose to cross the road. He was outraged that there wasn't a traffic light or a wildlife crossing schedule. When the officer explained that moose don't obey signals, the man said, "Well, they should." It's 2026. He demanded the moose be trained to cross during non-peak hours. The officer, keeping a straight face that deserves an award, suggested he write to the Department of Transportation, Animal Division. The tourist nodded seriously and asked for the address. Somewhere out there, a moose is still crossing the road at his own pace, blissfully unaware he caused an international diplomatic incident. 7. The ice complaint. A couple from Florida visiting Banff demanded to speak to management because their drinks were too cold. When told the ice was made from local glacier water, they panicked. Wait, glacier water? Isn't that radioactive? They insisted on being given regular American ice, preferably from a machine. not the environment. The bartender tried explaining that glacier water was literally the cleanest on Earth, but they were unconvinced. The woman whispered, "That's how they get you. First it's the fancy ice, then the healthcare." They left in a hurry, leaving behind untouched cocktails and an unpaid tab. To this day, the bartender swears that conversation gave him frostbite. 8. The bilingual breakdown. In Quebec City, an American tourist stormed out of a restaurant after receiving a menu written in both French and English. "Pick a language," he shouted. "You're confusing people." The waiter, switching politely between both, offered him help translating. The man took offense, saying, "I speak American, not metric French." He accused the restaurant of trying to show off and demanded they stick to normal English like the rest of North America. When the manager arrived to smooth things over, the tourist dramatically announced he was leaving this part of France immediately. He drove 2 hours to Ottawa and triumphantly declared, "Finally, back in Canada." The bilingual waiter just shrugged, proof that no matter how many languages you speak, stupidity always translates perfectly. Divini. The fake Mounties fiasco. A Canadian couple visiting Washington, D.C. filed a complaint at a museum gift shop because none of the Mounties outside would take pictures with us. The clerk gently explained that there are no Royal Canadian Mounted Police in the United States, only security guards. The husband refused to believe it. They had red shirts and hats. He accused the museum of false advertising for not including authentic Canadian law enforcement as part of the experience. When told that Mounties don't patrol American monuments, the wife sighed and whispered, "Then who's guarding the moose?" The couple demanded compensation in the form of free maple syrup or at least some poutine. The bewildered staff offered a fridge magnet instead. They accepted, reluctantly, and declared the entire city a poor imitation of Ottawa. Somewhere, a real Mountie probably felt a mysterious sense of secondhand embarrassment. 10. The iceberg complaint. An American tourist in Newfoundland once called a tour company to complain that the iceberg looked smaller than in the brochure. When the guide explained that icebergs melt over time, she snapped, "Then get a new one." She insisted that the company replace it or offer a refund, as if they had a warehouse full of spare glaciers. When told that Mother Nature controls the inventory, she accused them of false advertising and demanded to speak to whoever's in charge of the ice. The guide politely handed her a chunk of melting ice and said, "Here's management." She didn't laugh. Instead, she muttered, "Typical Canadian customer service," and stomped off, carefully, so she wouldn't slip on the free sample. 11. The moose costume protest. During a holiday parade in Vermont, a Canadian tourist became outraged upon realizing that the giant moose in the procession was a person in a costume, not a real moose. He called it animal exploitation and demanded the city free the moose immediately. When volunteers tried explaining that it was just foam and fabric, he accused them of lying and covering up the animal's suffering. A child pointed out the zipper on the costume's back, which only made him angrier. "If that's a zipper, then he's trapped in there!" Security eventually escorted him away while he shouted about fake wildlife and American propaganda. The parade carried on, foam moose and all, while local kids cheered, and one Canadian man vowed to boycott this fake forest forever. 12. The coffee confusion. In Toronto, an American visitor ordered a regular coffee at Tim Hortons and got furious when it arrived with cream and sugar. The cashier politely explained that in Canada, regular means double-double, 2 creams, 2 sugars. The man declared it a national coffee conspiracy, demanding unmanipulated caffeine. He insisted that Canada was trying to Americanize the metric system of flavor and lectured the teenage cashier about coffee freedom. She smiled, poured him a black coffee, and said, "Welcome to Canada." He took a sip, frowned, and muttered, "Still tastes too polite." Somewhere, a Timbit trembled under the weight of his righteous indignation. 13. The Maple Leaf Mix-Up. A couple from Vancouver visiting New York proudly waved at what they thought was a Canadian flag flying over a hotel. It was, in fact, the flag of Peru. When informed, they got defensive, claiming, "It's the same red and white, don't get technical." Later, they complained to hotel management that the maple leaf looked weird and that someone should fix it before the ambassador visits. The manager explained that it wasn't their flag at all. The husband accused him of erasing Canadian culture. and threatened to call the embassy. The Peruvian guests at the next table just quietly sipped their cocktails, enjoying the free entertainment. It was an international misunderstanding, one fueled by jet lag, patriotism, and a complete lack of basic geography. 14. The Hockey Hall of Fame outrage. An American father visiting Toronto's Hockey Hall of Fame stormed out after learning that not every exhibit was about Wayne Gretzky. "I paid good money to see the great one, not some Swedish guy I've never heard of," he fumed. Staff gently explained that hockey is an international sport. He scoffed, "Since when?" and demanded to know where they kept the American trophies. When they pointed to several, he muttered, "Fine, but they should be bigger." His teenage son quietly whispered, "Dad, we're in Canada." The father snapped, "Exactly, that's the problem." The family left in a huff, loudly announcing they'd be writing to the NHL about this injustice. Somewhere, Gretzky himself probably sighed and whispered, "Sorry." 15. The snow complaint. In Calgary, a Florida couple staying at a resort during winter called the front desk to complain that their car was trapped under some sort of cold dust. Staff explained it was snow. "We know snow," the husband said. "This isn't snow, it's frozen sand." They demanded the hotel remove it immediately, as if housekeeping controlled the weather. When told to wait for the plow, they accused the resort of scheduling snowstorms for dramatic effect. The wife added, "We saw it on the travel brochure. It looked staged." By morning, the plow had cleared the lot. They still weren't satisfied, claiming the air was too crisp and the sky too blue to be natural. Somewhere, winter itself considered resigning from its job. Chiliu. The poutine panic. In Montreal, a group of American tourists caused a mild scene at a diner after ordering poutine and declaring it a culinary emergency. They insisted something was wrong with their fries because they were wet and cheesy. When the waiter explained that's how poutine works, one woman gasped, "You mean you intentionally ruin the fries?" Another accused the restaurant of sneaking dairy into her meal and demanded dry replacement fries, American style. The waiter offered to bring her plain fries, but she refused, saying the entire plate had been psychologically contaminated. They left a one-star review that read, "Beware, Canada ruins potatoes." Somewhere in Quebec, a chef added extra gravy to his next order, just out of spite. 17. The polar bear complaint. A Canadian couple visiting Alaska filed a complaint at a wildlife center because they didn't see any polar bears just walking around. They accused the park of false advertising for showing bear photos on the brochure. When staff explained that polar bears live hundreds of miles north in the Arctic, the couple argued, "That's ridiculous. Alaska is the Arctic." They demanded a refund and a written apology from whoever's in charge of the bears. When the ranger politely offered to show them videos of polar bears instead, they said, "No, we came for the real thing." They left disappointed, vowing to visit a zoo next time, where nature actually shows up. 18. The crossing guard crisis. An American motorist in British Columbia called 911 to report a person in a yellow jacket stopping traffic without authority. It was a crossing guard helping school children. The driver insisted it was vigilante traffic control and demanded an officer restore order. When police arrived and confirmed that the person was indeed an official crossing guard, the man still refused to accept it. "Since when do Canadians have traffic police for kids?" he asked. The officer calmly explained the concept of safety. The man, clearly offended by logic, muttered, "Well, in America, we just teach them to look both ways." The officer smiled and said, "Yes, and in Canada, we like them to survive it." 19. The currency confusion. At a Toronto mall, an American shopper tried to pay for a purchase with US dollars and became enraged when the cashier gave him Canadian change. "Why are you giving me monopoly money?" he barked. The clerk explained the exchange rate and offered to convert the rest of the amount. The man said, "You should be grateful to take American cash. It's the real one." When told politely that Canada has its own currency, he shouted, "That's ridiculous. We're on the same continent." He left muttering about fake rainbow money and how no wonder your economy's polite. Later, he tried to use a Canadian toonie in a US vending machine, only to complain again when it didn't fit. 20. The quiet wilderness outrage. A Canadian tourist visiting Yosemite National Park stormed into the ranger station, furious that the wilderness was too loud. He said the waterfalls were aggressively noisy, the birds wouldn't shut up, and the wind kept interrupting his meditation. The ranger tried explaining that nature is, in fact, alive, and therefore not subject to noise ordinances. The man argued, "Back home, our national parks are more civilized." When asked where he was from, he said, "Toronto," as if that explained everything. He demanded the park install volume controls for visitors seeking peace and quiet. The ranger suggested earplugs. He replied, "I didn't drive 2,000 miles for earplugs, buddy." Somewhere, a squirrel paused mid-chirp and thought, "This guy's definitely from the city." 21. The healthcare shock. An American tourist in Vancouver went to a clinic for a minor rash, then caused chaos at the front desk when no one handed him a bill. "You mean I just leave?" he asked, suspicious. The receptionist nodded. He frowned. "So when does the invoice show up? 6 months? A year?" She smiled and said, "There isn't one." He stared like she'd confessed to witchcraft. "That can't be right," he said. "Someone has to suffer financially." She assured him it was covered by the provincial system. He muttered, "That's socialism with better lighting." He left the clinic looking paranoid, as if free medical care were a sting operation. Later, he told his wife he was never trusting a country that treats rashes for free. 22. The time zone tantrum. A Canadian family driving from Alberta into Montana stormed into a diner, confused and outraged that their phones suddenly lied about the time. They insisted the clock on the wall was incorrect by an hour and accused the waitress of gaslighting tourists. When she explained they had crossed a time zone, the father squinted and said, "So, you're telling me the government just moves time around whenever it feels like it?" The waitress nodded patiently, used to this kind of conversation. "That's insane," he declared. "In Canada, time stays where it belongs." His teenage son mumbled, "Dad, we literally change clocks twice a year." The dad ignored him, demanded a time adjustment discount, and left convinced Montana was running on fake hours. 23. The metric meltdown. An American tourist in Vancouver nearly had a breakdown at a gas station after seeing fuel sold in liters. "How many liters are in a gallon?" he asked the clerk, who replied, "About 3.8. The man's face turned pale. "So I'm paying 4 times as much for gas?" he shouted. The clerk tried to explain basic conversion, but the tourist was unconvinced. "This is metric fraud," he said, slamming the counter. "You're scamming Americans with foreign math." The clerk calmly handed him a calculator, which only made things worse. After 10 minutes of furious tapping, the man gave up and said, "I'm driving back to a country that uses real numbers." Somewhere, a high school math teacher sighed softly, knowing she'd done her best. 24. The maple tree complaint. During autumn in Quebec, a couple from Texas called the local forestry department to report a massive syrup spill in the woods. They'd parked under a maple tree and noticed sticky drops on their windshield. When told it was just natural sap, they grew defensive. "Don't try to cover this up," the woman warned. "You people love syrup. This is obviously industrial leakage." She demanded they clean up the spill before the wildlife gets diabetes. The ranger promised to look into it, mostly because he wanted to hear how deep this conspiracy went. Before leaving, the husband scraped a little off the car and tasted it. "Yup," he said, "that's pancake-grade contamination." Canada, where even trees can't escape being accused of running a condiment cartel. 25. The border sign breakdown. An American couple crossing from Ontario back into Michigan refused to proceed because the bilingual "Welcome to the United States" sign didn't include metric conversions. It says 25 miles per hour. But what if someone's driving in kilometers? The wife asked. The border officer politely explained that once they entered the U.S., speed limits were in miles again. "That's chaos!" she exclaimed. "No wonder your roads are so violent." The husband nodded gravely and demanded a conversion chart for patriotic accuracy. The officer handed them one just to make them leave. They crossed the border muttering about how Canada almost tricked us into metric treason. Somewhere, a customs agent probably put a gold star on the day's stupidity chart. 26. The moose souvenir situation. At a souvenir shop in Banff, a tourist from California demanded a refund for a plush moose because it doesn't make noise. The clerk explained it wasn't supposed to. It was a stuffed toy. "Well, then it's false advertising," he said. "Real moose make sounds." When the clerk offered a keychain that did make a moose call, he scoffed. "That's not authentic. I wanted the full moose experience." He then claimed the antlers were inaccurate to scale and requested to speak with whoever's in charge of wildlife branding. The clerk politely refunded him, mostly to keep the line moving. As he left, the man muttered, "I knew Canada was too quiet to be real." Somewhere, an actual moose snorted approvingly in the distance. 27. The flag mix-up finale. A Canadian man visiting Boston proudly wore a shirt with a large maple leaf, only to be repeatedly congratulated by locals for his great support for the Red Sox. After the fifth misunderstanding, he snapped at a shopkeeper, "It's the Canadian flag, not your baseball team." The shopkeeper smiled and said, "Buddy, around here, they're the same thing. Red, white, and slightly disappointing in October." The Canadian didn't laugh. Instead, he filed an online complaint calling Boston culturally insensitive to foreign leaf-based symbols. The next day, someone responded, "At least your team makes the playoffs. Sometimes." It was the most polite international flame war the internet had ever seen. And there you have it, 27 moments proving that when tourists cross the US-Canada border, common sense often stays behind for customs inspection. So, which one deserves a lifetime travel ban, or at least a refund for emotional intelligence? Tell me below, before someone tries to sue a beaver for property damage again.